Tsakonia, Greek, tau sigma alpha kappa omega nu iota, or the Tsakonian region, tau sigma alpha kappa omega nu iota kappa Cairo omicron, refers to the small area in the eastern Peloponnese where the Tsakonian language is spoken. It is not a formally defined political entity of the modern Greek state, being more akin to such vague regional constructions as Dixie in the United States or the West Country in England. In his brief grammar of the Tsakonian dialect published in 1951, Professor Thanasis Kostakis defines Tsakonia as the area from the town of Agios Andreas in Kinuria south to Leonidio in Tyros and inland as far as Kastanitsa and Satina, but asserts that in former times the Tsakonian-speaking area extended as far as Cape Malea in eastern Laconia. The principal town in Tsakonia at this time was Prastos, which benefited from a special trading privilege granted by the authorities in Constantinople. Prastos was burned by Ibrahim Pasha in the Greek War of Independence and was abandoned, with many of its residents fleeing to the area around Leonidio and Tyros or other spots on the Argolic Gulf. Some early commentators seem to have confused the speech of Maniot dialect speakers with true Tsakonian, demonstrating the flexible nature of the term. The actual Tsakonian speech community has shrunk greatly since brief grammar was published, but the area delineated by Kostakis is still considered Tsakonia due to the preservation of certain cultural traits such as the Tsakonian dance and unique folk costumes. The Tsakonian-speaking region was once much more widespread than it was at the time of brief grammar. Elias Shalabi noted in 1668 that the village of Bathika, far south of Leonidio, was Tsakonian, however that place would later be resettled by Arvanites. The Chronicle of Moria, 14th century, furthermore indicates that Tsakonian was spoken in Sinuria, which is now part of Arcadia but was once considered to be in the northeast of Laconia. The original Tsakonian region may have consisted of the entire eastern half of Laconia. The term Tsakonas or Tsakonas first emerges in the writings of Byzantine chroniclers who derive the ethnonym from a corruption of Laconas, a Laconian/Lacedaemonian, Spartan, a reference to the Doric roots of the Tsakonian language and the people's very late conversion to Christianity in the 9th century and practice of traditional Hellenic customs, a fact which correlated with their isolation from mainstream medieval Greek society. What is often considered the first reference to Tsakonians is a note from around 950 by Constantine Porphyrogenitus in his De Arte Imperiando. The inhabitants of the district of Maine are of the older Greeks, who are to this day called Hellenes, pagans, by the locals for being pagans in time past and worshippers of idols, like the Hellenes of old, and were baptized and became Christians during the reign of the late Basil, 867 to 886, with Maine in his usage typically interpreted to instead mean Tsakonia. The Tsakonians are thought to have been often border guards in the Byzantine military, judging by the number of references to tau zeta kappa omega nu epsilon and tau zeta kappa omega nu epsilon playing such roles in Byzantine Greek writings. The first reference to their barbaric speech being unintelligible to Koine Greek dates to the 15th century. According to the Byzantine historian George Pachymeters, some Tsakonians were resettled by the Byzantine Emperor Michael VII Ducas in Propontis. This was part of their compensation for serving as Marines in the Byzantine navy. They and the Peloponnesian Gazmaloi, who served in the same role, were dismissed from service by Michael's successor, Andronicus II, who made large reductions in the naval force, preferring to rely on Genoese mercenaries. They lived in the villages of Vatka and Habatsi, where the Gozan River, Aesipus, empties into the sea. However, based on the preservation of features common to both Propontis and the Peloponnesian dialects, Professor Thanasis Kostakis thinks that the date of settlement must have been several centuries later. The Tsakonians, Greek, tau sigma kappa omega nu epsilon Tsakones, are a Greek ethnolinguistic group who historically speak the Tsakonian dialect and have certain peculiar cultural traditions, such as the Tsakonian dance. Today, the dialect is critically endangered. Tsakonians in later time were known for their masonry skills. Many were also shepherds. A common practice was for a small crew of men under a mastore to leave their village after the feast of St. Demetrius and to return at Easter. They would travel as far as Attica doing repairs and whitewashing houses. The Tsakonian village of Kastanitsa was known for its chestnuts and derives its name from the Greek word for the nut. The paper Genetics of the Peloponnesian Populations and the Theory of Extinction of the Medieval Peloponnesian Greeks, 2017, studied the Tsakonians under two groups, one from the south, 15 samples, and one from the north, 9 samples, of the region. Both populations have a very high average pairwise IBD sharing of 0.66% of their genome, or 94 centimeters, and every pair of individuals shares at least one IBD segment. Tsakonians possess low levels of common ancestry with the Slavs, Belarusians, Russians, Polish, and Ukrainians, at 0.2% to 0.9% for the southern group and at 3.9% to 8.2% for the northern group. The rest of the Peloponnesians, 148 samples, excluding the Maniots, even though possessing low levels of common ancestry with the Slavs as well, they are still relatively higher than that of Tsakonians and Maniots, at 4.8% to 14.4%. Even though Maniots, divided under the groupings of Deep Mani or Mesa/Inner Mani, 22 samples, West Tayagitos or Exo/Outer Mani, 24 samples, and East Tayagitos or Kato/Lower Mani, 23 samples, are similarly conservative at 0.7% to 1.6%, 4.9% to 8.6%, and 5.7% to 10.9% of common ancestry with the Slavs respectively. Tsakonians remain a distinct population from both the Maniots and the rest of the Peloponnesians, something that is attributed to isolation by distance and the possibility that Tsakonia in antiquity was inhabited by Doric-speaking Ionians, per Herodotus, while Mani by actual Dorians.